Okay, what's going on, everybody? We're here, we're live. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Thank you all for your patience. I know the wait grift is crazy. Got to make y'all wait for a little bit. Can't start just right on time. But I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you can see and hear me clearly, please drop a one in the live chat, and then we can get today's show started. And as I'm waiting for the ones to come in, if you haven't already, please hit that like button. That is the most important thing that you can do for me on this channel. That helps so this video permeates throughout the YouTube algorithm. That way, this video will go out to those who are interested in this type of comment and this type of content. And it also assists in making sure that those who are subscribed to the channel actually get their notifications. So please do that for me if you have not already. That is extremely important. Also, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already and you're new to the channel, as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button. And also make sure you share this video out on your social media platforms as well, so everyone knows that I'm currently live. And it also has the same effect within the YouTube algorithm. Shout out to Jaybird for being a channel member for 19 months. Man, round of applause for Jaybird. I appreciate that continuous support, brother. I truly, truly do. So I see the ones are coming in. Let me drop this on the floor real quick. Okay. I see the ones are coming in. So we can get today's stream started. Let's get into it. So as you can see by the thumbnail is Eric Adams yelling at those crossing the border, right? Saying, stay away from New York. And the title of today's stream is Eric Adams warns migrants stay away from New York City. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Are people taking heed to his warning? That's the real question. Are they taking heed to the warning? And we're going to get into all of that today. Now, the first thing that I want to do, I didn't remember to put my earpiece in, but the first thing I want to do is this, right? Over the time period that I've been covering Mayor Eric Adams, I've definitely have come to take in, you can say, a liking to him, right? I've taken a liking to him throughout this time period, more so than like, I would say I've been starting to respect him a lot more. I've been starting to respect him a lot more just based off of his stance and how he's been unwavering in his critique of the Biden administration, and their lack of effort and their lack of assistance when it comes to the Biden crisis towards New York City. He's been rather courageous in a way that most Democrat politicians, especially one in his position being in New York City, would never be, as goes the case with Brandon Johnson, who was a non-playable character out in Chicago. You would never see him do the things that Eric Adams is doing. But I got a healthy reminder recently to not get too carried away with my respect for Adams. You know, don't get too carried away with all that, because at the end of the day, he is still just a Democrat. He is still just an establishment Democrat. And I was reminded of that with these two videos that I'm going to play with you. I'm going to play for you right now, right? So the first video that I'm going to play before we get into the meat of the discussion is Eric Adams being asked a very direct question concerning the closing of the border. Now, you all know me. I'm 100% in favor of closing the border, as I'm sure most of you are in favor of closing the border as well. But let's hear what Eric Adams' answer was to that question when he was asked whether or not he was in favor of closing the border. So let's get into that right now. Uh-oh. Give me just a second. Looks like I have to if you know me well enough, and Rob knows me well enough, you all know how irritated I am right now. Jesus, it's always something, isn't it? So anyways, let me re-upload this video and then we can get into it. So this is Eric Adams' response to whether or not he supports closing the border. Should be pulling up for you right now.
Can you say who from this table is going with you and who isn't NYPD, who's not part of your security detail? is going with you south of the border? And then secondly, do you stand by your chief advisor's contention that the federal government needs to close the borders?
She asked him, do you stand by your chief advisor's contention that the Biden administration needs to close the border? I'll run that back one more time since I interrupted.
Your chief advisor's contention that the federal government needs to close the borders?
We believe the borders should remain open. That's the official position of this city, but we have made it clear there should be a decompression strategy that we could properly deal with the volumes that's coming into our city, and no cities should have to carry the burden of the national government.
Where there you have it. He said that we need to keep the borders open. We have to remember, and like I said, it was a good reminder for myself. Eric Adams is just upset that this mess has landed in his backyard, and he's basically been left stranded by the Democratic Party to clean it up himself. But at the end of the day, he is still taking his orders from DNC leadership and is, for the most part, falling in line with the open borders policy of the Democratic Party. He is 100% for open borders. Now, I also want to play this next video as well, and then we're going to get into the meat of today's show. So not only is he in support of open borders, but take a listen to this question and the way he answered it when he was asked directly on whether or not he would cooperate with the federal government as it pertains to deporting Venezuelans, because Biden announced not too long ago that they're actually going to start deporting some Venezuelans, those who are here illegally. And he was asked a very direct question, Eric Adams, will you cooperate with the federal government to deport Venezuelans? And this was his answer. Let me pull that video up for you as well.
You can unmute your line.
Hear me okay?
Yeah, Bernadette, if you could just talk up a little more.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, once the White House rolls out this plan to deport Venezuelans that are here unlawfully and also have not applied for legal protections, do you plan on assisting them with these deportations and also information sharing?
Okay, I didn't get you completely. Did you hear the question?
She said, do you plan on assisting the federal government with deportation?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Do you plan on assisting the federal government with deportation efforts with Venezuelans?
What we're going to do in New York City is we're going to follow the law, and whatever the law requires us to do in New York City, the uniqueness of our city, we're going to do that. We're going to comply with whatever laws our city has in place. As everyone knows, I don't break laws, I follow laws, and we're going to make sure whatever the law is, that's what we want to follow.
That was a great non-answer, wasn't it? That was a brilliant non-answer. But wait, there's more.
Next, we'll go to Mike Gartland. Mike, you can unmute your line.
Can't hear you, Michael, if you're talking.
Now?
Yes, I can.
So I want to ask you about the, deportations as a follow-up to Bern's question. If you're following the law on that, does that in some way affect the city's status as a sanctuary city? I mean, can you just kind of get into the weeds more on that? If you're helping with deportations, which the federal government's trying to do, would that in some way impact the city's status as a sanctuary city? And if so, how?
Our city is very clear on what the law is around coordinating with ICE, and those are the laws that this administration is going to comply with. The laws are very clear, and I'm going to adhere to the laws that were in place prior to me getting in office, and I'm not going to do anything to go against those laws.
Okay, so translation. New York City is a sanctuary city, and as we all know, what that means, right? For those who don't know, just to be a little bit more technical and direct about that, sanctuary cities being a sanctuary cities does not mean that and illegal immigrant cannot be deported. That's not what that means. They can be deported, but what it simply means is that the local government will not comply with the federal government and ICE as it pertains to giving them information about said illegal immigrant, right? So essentially, it's a no snitching policy. That's all it is. So as far as ICE is concerned, if you guys want to come into the state or the city, we can't stop you. You can go look for wherever you want to look for, but we're not giving up any information, no snitching. So now that that's established, let's now get into the meat of today's show. And that's surrounding Eric Adams' world tour, I should say Latin American tour that he was on in an effort to persuade and inform Hispanics to not come to New York. Do not come to New York. There's no room for you. We can't do anything for you. You're not getting any 5-star hotels. That's the tour that he was on. He was on the Don't Come to New York City tour, which was touring around Latin America. Now, to dive a little deeper into the specifics of what he said and what people's response was to what he was doing, what I want to do is pull up this New York Times article that should be popping up in front of your screen right now, titled Adams to Migrants in Mexico. We love you. Now stop coming to New York. And before we dive into that article, there are 388 of you in the stream right now. Please hit the like button if you have not already. Please hit that like button. And thank you very much, John Farrell, for becoming a channel member. I appreciate the support, brother. And also thank you very much, as always, Cutthroat Nash, who stated, if they're following the law, they shouldn't worry about deportation. TF, exclamation mark. And I think we all know what TF means. And I 100% agree with you, Cutthroat Nash. I 100% agree. Now, let's get into this article right here from the New York Times. And it reads off as such. Let me just slide down just a little bit and get straight to the point of this article. Earlier in the week, the mayor said that on his trip, he planned to blanket the media in Latin America with the message that New York City was absolutely out of room and that migrants should not expect to stay in a 5-star hotel. That is a quote from Eric Adams. And the article continues to read, in a room in Puebla's Congress building, featuring an ornate memorial to migrants who had died crossing the border, decorated with statues of angels and weeping children, he told reporters that one of his goals was to communicate to the people of all the countries who were visiting that New York City has reached capacity, and we don't want to turn their aspirations for dreams into nightmares. He doesn't want to turn into a nightmare. But here's something that's very interesting from a woman named Natalia Bogdan, who is an immigrant expert, right? And she had some things to say about his trip that I thought were very interesting. And Natalia stated this. Natalia Bogdan stated, Natalia Bogdan, an immigrant expert who has conducted research on messaging around immigration, offered a blunt assessment of the mayor's plan. I don't believe that this method will be effective, said Mrs. Bogdan, a deputy director of the Migration Policy Institute, a nonpartisan think tank. She said the mayor's claim that the city is out of room is contradicted by the social media posts and news accounts migrants see showing people finding places to stay and work in the city. The other problem, Ms. Bogdan said, is the messenger. People understand that government actors have their own incentive and interest behind the message they're trying to disseminate. They are much more likely to believe things they hear from people they know and trust, she said. And that actually makes a lot of sense, right? We all know that politicians lie. They make stuff up. They'll just say anything, right? They're more likely to believe what they hear from those that are already here, touched down on the ground. And if the reports from New York City or Chicago back to Latin America from the people they know is that it is hard out here. We're not finding any work. ICE is on our bumper and it's extremely stressful. That's what will actually deter people from coming. But as we all know, that isn't what's happening here, right? Now let's carry on with this New York Times article. We're almost done with it, and then we're going to hop over into another one. So now it continues to read, and this is still coming from Ms. Bogdan. Mr. Adams' negative publicity campaign, and she doesn't mean negative in the bad light, like she's speaking ill on Eric Adams. She just means his negative publicity campaign of don't come to New York, right? Mr. Adams' negative publicity campaign, Ms. Bogdan said, could easily backfire. The surreal sight of the mayor of America's financial capital, a stylish man with swagger, traveling thousands of miles to one of the most desperate places on earth, could end up inadvertently functioning as a recruiting tool, she said. Migrants might come away thinking that if the mayor is so worried about the drain of the city's resources, he was willing to go to migrants might come away thinking that if the mayor is so worried about the drain on the city's resources, he was willing to go to the effort to tell them in person. The city must be a place with tremendous resources. On the other hand, she said, Mr. Adams could benefit at home from being seen as a hands-on leader willing to roll up his sleeve. And I wanted to highlight that last point as well. Mr. Adams could benefit at home from being seen as a hands-on leader willing to roll up his sleeves. A lot of this stuff that we're starting to see, right, with politicians going down to the border. Brandon Johnson recently, last week in a press conference, said that I'm going to go travel down to the border to assess the situation. That's just political posturing. Somebody like Brandon Johnson, and you see Eric Adams took it a step further by actually going on a Latin American tour. But let's now go back to Brandon Johnson now, right, in Chicago. What is going to the border actually going to accomplish? What is he actually going to assess? When you hear mayors and governors say this, we're going to assess the situation by going to the border. What are these mayors and governors going to assess that the federal government, with its infinite capabilities and its infinite resources, haven't already assessed? You see how silly all that is? So it's really just a publicity stunt, as Brandy Matthews says in the comment section. That's all it is. It's political posturing. It's a publicity stunt, and it doesn't really mean anything. Now, personally, I think in the case of Eric Adams, I think he is really that desperate that he thought that this would help. But as we're going to see now, as we hop into this political article here, is that we're going to see that he never actually stood a chance. This whole thing was for naught. And he never stood a chance with his Latin American tour, because regardless, the people were going to show up. This article here is titled, "The Only Option." Migrants say New York City remains best choice amid Adams' discouragement. So I just want to read this quick couple paragraphs for you. And in the beginning, I'm not going to read all this off right here, but this article starts off discussing the treacherous route that migrants take, right, to get to the United States, how horrible it is and how dangerous it is, so on and so forth. And from there, it continues to read, and at no point, meaning the woman who they were talking about who traveled here with her child, because that's who they were talking about at the beginning of this article. But it reads, and at no point, not even as they crossed the border at El Paso, Texas, and took a bus north to New York, did they hear that the Democratic mayor of the nation's largest city had been encouraging migrants not to come. If they had, they wouldn't have cared, and they doubt any others would have either. So once again, the woman in the beginning two paragraphs of this article who traveled over here from Latin America stated at no point did she even hear about anything concerning Eric Adams attempting to discourage them from coming to New York. And nonetheless, it wouldn't have mattered. But now the article continues to read as such. And this is very interesting here because this is a direct quote from a Hispanic male named Abel Gomez. And he states this: "You think the mayor will go there and say, 'Don't come in,' and they won't come? They're not going to listen to that," Abel Gomez said Wednesday, speaking in Spanish as he sat on the curb with his family outside of McDonald's in Queens. The family's comments were echoed this week in interviews with more than a dozen migrants in New York City across Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. Not one said that they were lured to the United States by coordinated media campaigns that promise glitz and glamour, as Adams has suggested. Not one thought they'd encounter a quote 5-star hotel. Stay in the a quote 5-star, excuse me. Not one thought they'd encounter the 5-star hotel stays that the mayor says some were led to accept. So they never expected any of that. I think that that's very important to point out. They never expected to come stay in a 5-star hotel, right? They never expected any glitz and glamour. They just wanted to get here by any means necessary while Biden still has the border open, right? And this is before Eric Adams even went down to the border. That's before he even went down. But now what I want to point out to you and what I want you all to see is the arrogance of some of these so-called migrants who now have the audacity to be offended with Eric Adams' trip. They have the audacity to be offended with what he's doing. And I want to get into that right now. Let me pull that article up for you. Give me just a moment. I thought I had it, but I didn't. But as I'm pulling that article up for you, please, there are 526 of you in the live stream right now. Please hit the like button if you have not already. That is the most important thing that you can do for the channel. And also, if you have not already, please make sure you follow me on Telegram. I have about 300 some odd people following me on Telegram currently. I'm looking to have 1,000 followers by the end of this year. That helps negate a lot of the shadow banning that goes on social media and YouTube. So please follow me on Telegram. The link is pinned in the live chat above, as well as in the description box below, and will be pinned in the comment section below after the stream is over. And also, join the text message group. You can join the text message group to not miss one live stream by texting tdhiphop to number 33222. Text tdhiphop to number 33222, and that way you can join the text message notification group. And I promise you all, everybody in the live chat and the comment section will tell you, I don't spam you with nonsense. That's only when I go live. Now let's pull up this article right here. And give me just a second while I get this up. Okay. And this article here is titled, "Migrants Defy Mayor Eric Adams' Calls for Them to Stay Away from New York. We are good people." Once again, they defy it. They heard Eric Adams. They heard him say, "Stay away from New York. Don't come here. We got nothing for you." And they said, "Nope, we heard you, Eric Adams, and we're coming anyways." Now let's get into this, right? Migrants say they are still determined to make their way to New York City despite strong rhetoric from Mayor Eric Adams, who recently finished a 4-day tour of Latin America. Despite the warning, more than a dozen migrants bound for the U.S. told the New York Times that Adams' comments would not deter them from reaching the city. So basically, Adams, you can say whatever you want. We're coming anyways. Now, here's a direct quote from a Venezuelan who stated, "I think he, as a mayor, is defending his country." Joanna del Valle Acosta said, a mother of 3 traveling from Venezuela. "Suddenly, other countries see us as a threat, but we are good people who want to work." Now, here is the interesting part. Here's where the entitlement comes in. And I want you all to really pay attention to this here, right? But give me a moment while the video is playing on this website and it's distracting me. So let me pause that. Okay. So now let's get back into this last paragraph because this is very interesting. Like I said, the entitlement is insane. It is completely ridiculous. Now check this out. On Friday in Quito, Carlos Gabriel Hernandez revealed that he and his wife and 2 children had previously attempted to cross the Daran Gap. While the initial trip proved to be treacherous, he said his family still has plans to reach New York. Now, mind you, this gentleman isn't even here yet. He's still on the other side of the border in Mexico. But here's what he had to say from on the other side of the border in Mexico after hearing about Eric Adams' Don't Come to New York tour. Hernandez said that he was offended to learn why Adams had decided to visit and claimed his arrival in the region would not change the minds of everyone coming to the border. Mr. Hernandez was offended. He was offended. Now, mind you, he's attempting to cross through what's called the Daran Gap. And if I'm not mistaken, the Daran Gap is not a legal point of entry. The Daran Gap is an illegal point of entry. But that's where he's trying to come from. Let me give you a visual right now of what Mr. Hernandez is doing. Imagine Mr. Hernandez was attempting to break into your home, but he couldn't get in, right? He was struggling to get in. And he hears your cry saying, hey, man, don't come in here. And as you're telling him not to come in here, Mr. Hernandez has the audacity to be offended that you won't just let him break into your house and says, despite the fact that you're telling me not to come in, guess what? I'm coming in. That's what's going on here right now. That's the kind of arrogance that people are approaching this Biden crisis with, right? They're so arrogant that they're telling you from the other side of the border, whether you like it or not, I'm coming. Whether you say you have the resources or not, I'm coming. Regardless of who it impacts, we do not care. We are coming. And when there is no fear of deportation, right? When you know you're going to be housed and taken care of, especially when you go to New York and Chicago, when you know these are sanctuary cities that do not cooperate with the federal government, why wouldn't they be as bold, right? I guess it makes sense. It doesn't really make sense, but I guess I get it to a degree, right? I guess I get it to a degree. When you know that by and large, the establishment Democrats are on your side, I guess that would give you, a little cojones to be that bold. Now, let me finish off with what Mr. Hernandez had to say, and then I'll get back to Cutthroat Nash's super chat. Thank you, Cutthroat Nash, for always showing love. And for all of you who have showed love to this channel throughout the live stream, it is deeply appreciated. And I don't just say that just to be saying it. I truly do mean it. But let's get back into what Mr. Hernandez had to say in closing, right? Mr. Hernandez went on to say, how can you tell someone not to follow their American dream? He asked. Once again, he's crossing the border illegally. That has nothing to do with following the American dream. Crossing the border illegally versus your parents or great grandparents coming in as immigrants to New York. What was that called? Where they were I forget what the name of that was called, but they're coming on boat from Europe to New York. and they're seeing the Statue of Liberty. That's not the same thing. There was actual coordination between the U.S. and Europe to bring Europeans here, right, during that time period. Those aren't the same things. In 1965, I believe, was when the immigration bill was signed. It was a new immigration bill was signed that opened the doors to Asians to be able to come into the country. They were pursuing the American dream because there was coordination between the Asian countries and the United States. Thank you very much, McFact and everybody else. Ellis Island. When the Europeans came here to Ellis Island, right? That's not the same thing as crossing the border illegally. When you look at the 1965 Migration Act that opened the doors to Asians to be able to come here, there was coordination between the Asian countries and the United States. That's not the same thing as what Mr. Hernandez is doing. And then we'll take it one step further when we're talking about the descendants of American slavery who came here on the bottom of a slave ship and have been fighting to, attain and hold on to the American dream since they've been here. That is not the same thing as crossing the border illegally. All of those things are different. What he's seeking to do is not the American dream. You're seeking to take advantage of America's kindness and America's resources and the devious, underhanded nature of the Biden administration and essentially the Democrats as a whole. Because when you're talking about the Democrats, you're talking about this party that supposedly loves Black folks so much, they care so much about us. But when it comes to these practices that hurt the Black community the most, all of a sudden they can't hear what you're saying, right? Now, let me read this one last paragraph in the article, and then we can head on out of here. So it states this: the State Department has recently sent several delegations to the Darien region to discourage migration. However, these calls have often led to more migrants embarking on the trek. So as they go down to the Darien region, which is not a legal port of entry, to tell folks, hey, man, you can't come in. Once again, the arrogance. They say, well, you know what? Guess what? We're coming regardless. So essentially, in a nutshell, Eric Adams' entire trip was for naught. They were going to come regardless. And not only were they going to come regardless, they're offended by the fact that Eric Adams would even tell them not to come. Right? That's amazing. And with all that being said, that does it for today's stream. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. There are 587 of you in the live stream right now. Please hit the like button on your way out if you haven't already. And I want to thank all those from last live stream who showed love via super chat that I wasn't able to get to because I was in a rush. My deep apologies for not being able to get to you all. But I do thank you all from the previous live stream from last week. And shout out to, once again, Jay Bird. Shout out to Jay Bird for being a 19-month channel member. I appreciate you, Jay Bird. Shout out to John Farrow for becoming a channel member today. Shout out to Cutthroat Nash, always showing love. I see Blacklight. He put a little milestone, but I'm gonna disrespect Blacklight and not pull him up. I'm gonna skip right over Rob just because I like to be a douche like that every now and then. Cutthroat Nash said Adams should call ICE on them. These migrants are just showing up out of spite. That's what it sounds like, just showing up out of spite. The migrants don't respect him. So why show them any mercy? That's what Cutthroat Nash had to say. And thank you very much, Val Williams, and all of you who have showed love in today's stream. So once again, hit the like button on your way out. Thank you for your time. And until the next live stream, peace. Have a great evening. I'll catch you guys next time.